The Galactic War Summit was held in a chamber carved from obsidian and veined with pulsing blue circuitry. Representatives from a dozen species occupied the raised tiers of the amphitheater, murmuring in hushed tones. Above them, holographic tactical displays shifted, depicting past battles, territorial disputes, and the projected balance of power in the coming cycles. Captain Nathaniel Briggs stood rigid near the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind his back. The human delegation had been given a lower platform, a deliberate slight. Beside him, Sergeant Daniel Knox shifted uncomfortably in his polished, jet-black armor, the matte finish absorbing the chamber's cold, artificial light. "Look at them," came a sneering voice from the Zalvek delegation. Commander Tvar, draped in ceremonial gold plating, leaned forward, mandibles clicking in amusement. His species, tall and reptilian, favored exoskeletal armor woven with energy field projectors, sleek, shimmering barriers that pulse with latent power. Clad in metal, Tvar continued, his voice carrying across the hall. "Do your kind still forge weapons with fire and hammer? Perhaps you would like to trade your spears for real technology." Laughter rippled through the assembly. Other species exchanged glances, their amusement barely concealed. The humans, the newest entrants to the galactic stage, were still viewed as a primitive anomaly. Tough, yes, but technologically stagnant. Briggs did not react. He had expected this. The Zalvek thrived on dominance, using intimidation as their first and favorite weapon. Beside him, Knox's fingers twitched. "We were armor built for war," Briggs said evenly, "not decoration." Tvar's mandibles spread in a smirk. "War? You do not even understand war. You wrap yourselves in plates of crude metal, while the rest of us move beyond material limitations. Your primitive alloys," he waved a clawed hand dismissively, "would not withstand a single plasma round. Our shields render your armor relevant." Dr. Ethan Ross, the team's military scientist, cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Commander, our armor is more than metal plating. It is an advanced." Tvar raised a hand, silencing him. His golden eyes gleamed with amusement. "Then you will not object to a simple demonstration?" The chamber grew still. Knox turned his head toward Briggs, anticipation sharp in his gaze. Briggs hesitated, not from uncertainty, but because he knew exactly where this was going. Still, this was an opportunity. He exhaled. "A demonstration?" "A single shot," Tvar said, gesturing toward a Zalvek soldier who stepped forward with a plasma sidearm. The weapon hummed ominously, its barrel glowing blue. "One strike against your advanced armor. We will use a low-energy setting, of course. No harm will come to your soldier, at least not much." Knox grinned. "Let me do it, sir." Briggs studied his sergeant. The Zalvek expected fear or hesitation. They would receive neither. Briggs gave a slight nod. "Very well." Knox stepped forward and squared his shoulders. The amphitheater's lighting cast sharp shadows across his armor, emphasizing its angular plates. The Zalvek soldier aimed the plasma pistol at Knox's chest, adjusting the setting. "Prepare yourself," the soldier said, almost kindly. Knox did not flinch. A split-second flash of blue fire erupted from the weapon. The plasma bolt shot forward. A miniature sun condensed into a lethal arc of energy. It struck center mass, where it should have melted through plating, reducing the sergeant to a smoldering heap. Instead, a ripple, a shimmer of energy cascaded over the armor's surface. The plasma scattered, dispersing harmlessly across the material. Faint wisps of dissipated heat curled away. Knox remained standing, utterly untouched. The chamber fell into silence. Tvar's smirk vanished. His mandibles twitched, his posture rigid. His golden eyes locked onto Knox's armor, as if willing it to fail retroactively. The Zalvek soldier holding the plasma pistol slowly lowered his weapon, his reptilian brow furrowed in visible confusion. Knox tilted his head and knocked on his chest plate. "That it?" Murmurs spread through the chamber, hushed voices rising in intensity. This was not how the demonstration was supposed to unfold. Dr. Ross stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "As I was saying, our armor doesn't simply absorb impact. It disperses energy across a structured molecular lattice, neutralizing plasma on contact." His voice remained professional, but there was a quiet triumph beneath it. Briggs watched Tavares' expression carefully. The Zalvek commander was silent, his claws curling against the armrest of his seat. Finally, Tvar leaned forward. "A trick," he growled. "A low-energy setting. You knew it would survive that much. Let's try again with a real weapon." Knox laughed. "By all means." Briggs saw the shift in the room's atmosphere. This was no longer amusement. It was wariness. The other alien delegations, once mocking, now observed the humans with new eyes. If the armor worked as advertised, the implications were severe. Plasma weapons were the foundation of Zalvek military doctrine, and if that doctrine was rendered obsolete, Tavares' pride wouldn't allow him to back down. With a sharp motion, he gestured to another Zalvek soldier, who brought forward a larger plasma rifle, its coils humming with stored power. The weapon was calibrated, aimed, and charged. Briggs held up a hand. "Enough." Knox frowned. "Sir, I can take it." Briggs wasn't worried about Knox. He was worried about the Zalvek reaction. Their pride was already wounded. If they kept pushing and failed again, things might escalate beyond a demonstration. "We've proven our point," Briggs said. His tone was firm, unquestionable. "If you wish for further testing, we can arrange a controlled evaluation." For a long moment, Tvar remained motionless, fingers drumming against the armrest. Then, with a sharp, almost reluctant motion, he gestured for the rifle to be lowered. "This changes nothing," he said, but his voice lacked the same certainty. Briggs smiled. "Of course not." The silence in the chamber spoke otherwise. The silence in the chamber stretched, thick and suffocating. The Zalvek delegation had grown eerily still, their once smug expressions frozen in a mixture of disbelief and barely contained unease. The demonstration was supposed to humiliate the humans, to expose their primitive reliance on material plating in an era of energy-based warfare. Instead, the plasma bolt had dissipated like water against stone, leaving Sergeant Knox completely unharmed. Knox turned his head toward Tvar and gave a slow, deliberate smile. "So, do I get a medal for surviving your advanced weapons, or is that just another primitive tradition?" A murmur rippled to the gathered species. Not laughter, consideration. The same representatives who had scoffed minutes before were now whispering among themselves, eyes flicking toward the human delegation with something dangerously close to respect. Tavares' mandibles clicked in irritation. His claws curled against the armrest of his seat, but he masked his frustration well. "A clever deception," he said smoothly. "Your armor must be lined with energy-dispersing fields. Or perhaps your soldier was equipped with hidden shielding." Dr. Ethan Ross adjusted his glasses. "No deception. No hidden shielding. Our armor operates on a passive energy distribution lattice. Plasma doesn't vaporize it because there's nothing to vaporize. The material redirects the heat and force across a wide surface area, neutralizing the impact before it can penetrate." A Zalvek officer scoffed. "Impossible." Ross arched a brow, then explained what just happened. The Zalvek commander didn't reply. Instead, he turned toward one of his subordinates and barked something in his guttural native tongue. A second Zalvek soldier stepped forward, this one carrying a larger plasma rifle, its barrel pulsing with stored energy. Briggs tensed. Here it was the moment the Zalvek realized their mistake, but were too proud to stop. He had hoped Tvar would recognize the implications of what had just happened, but instead, the commander had chosen escalation over reason. "You misunderstand," Tvar said. "We fired a low-energy shot for the sake of demonstration. If you wish to make claims about your armor's capabilities, let us conduct a more thorough test." Knox didn't hesitate. "Go ahead." Briggs held up a hand. "Enough." Knox turned toward his captain, expression expectant but not defiant. Briggs met his gaze, then slowly looked back at Tvar. "Your weapons failed once. If they fail again, what will you do next? Bring out an even bigger gun? Keep pushing until you're satisfied." His voice remained calm, but there was an edge beneath it, a warning. Tvar narrowed his eyes. "What are you afraid of, Captain?" Briggs gave a small, measured smile. "Oh, I'm not afraid. I just don't think you like what happens if you fire again." Tvar stared at him. The two locked eyes, a silent battle waging between them. The Zalvek commander was accustomed to dominance, to intimidation tactics that sent lesser species scurrying. But Briggs was human, and humans didn't flinch. Slowly, the tension in the room shifted. It was no longer humans under scrutiny. It was the Zalvek. Would they fire? Would they risk proving once and for all that their greatest weaponry had just been rendered obsolete? Seconds ticked by. Then, without a word, Tvar gave a sharp flick of his clawed hand. The plasma rifle was lowered. Briggs exhaled silently. Knox's smirk widened. Smart choice. The chamber remained thick with unspoken words. The Zalvek, humiliated but unwilling to acknowledge defeat, sank back into their seats. The other delegations watched carefully, their expressions calculating. For the first time in the summit's history, the Zalvek were uncertain, and everyone knew it. Aftermath and fallout. The summit adjourned shortly after, but the damage had been done. Word traveled fast, faster than light, faster than diplomacy. By the time the human delegation returned to their assigned quarters, messages were already streaming in. Other species, once indifferent or dismissive of humanity, were now requesting private discussions. Potential allies, potential threats. Dr. Ross sat at the end of the conference table, reviewing data on a holoscreen. They won't let this go, he said. The Zalvek built their entire military doctrine around plasma supremacy. If they can't burn through our armor, their battlefield tactics become irrelevant. Which means they have two options, Briggs said. Adapt or eliminate the threat. Knox leaned back in his chair, folding his arms behind his head. Let me guess which one they're going to pick. The room fell into a heavy silence. No one needed to say it aloud. The Zalvek were too proud to rethink their weapons, too stubborn to change centuries of military doctrine overnight. Briggs drummed his fingers against the table. We need intel. Find out how they're responding to this. Diplomatic channels, black ops, I don't care. Just make sure we aren't walking into the next phase of a war we didn't start. Ross hesitated. There's something else you should know. He tapped a few commands on his holoscreen, pulling up a live data stream. The Zalvek fleet moved within an hour of the demonstration. Briggs frowned. Moved where? Ross looked up, his expression grim, toward the human colony on Vega 9. Silence. Then Knox's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up sharply. Son of a... Briggs was already on his feet. Give me fleet command. Now! The briefing room aboard the UHS Resolute was silent, except for the rhythmic hum of the ship's systems. The overhead holodisplay projected real-time fleet movements. A Zalvek strike force, 6 warships strong, accelerating toward Vega 9. The colony had minimal defenses, designed for research and trade, not war. Briggs stood at the head of the table, eyes locked on the shifting tactical map. His jaw was tight. They're not even bothering with diplomacy. Dr. Ross exhaled, rubbing his temple. They can't afford to. If word spreads that their plasma weapons are useless against us, they lose credibility. This isn't just an attack. It's an erasure. They're going to hit Vega 9 hard and make an example of it before the rest of the galaxy can react. Sergeant Knox cracked his knuckles. Then we make an example of them first. Briggs turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Henry Moore. How long until they reach the colony? Moore's fingers danced across the interface. 5 hours at their current velocity. We can intercept in 3 if we push the engines to emergency burn. Briggs didn't hesitate. Do it. The order was relayed instantly, and the ship lurched forward, inertia dampeners straining against a sudden acceleration. The Resolute was fast, faster than the Zalvek expected. That alone would work to their advantage. But speed wasn't enough. Briggs studied the enemy formation. The Zalvek were traveling in a standard wedge, their largest warship, the dreadnought Tvares Wrath, leading the assault. The rest of the fleet consisted of 2 cruisers and 3 escort frigates, positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. A traditional attack would be suicide. Knox, Briggs said, suit up. You're leading the boarding team. Knox grinned. About time we got to hit back. Ross hesitated. You're planning a boarding action against a Zalvek dreadnought? That's exactly what they won't expect, Briggs finished. They still think we're primitives in tin cans. We use that. Let them focus on us while Knox and his men cut the head off the snake. Ross exhaled but didn't argue. Then let's hope our armor works against something stronger than a sidearm. Knox patted his chest plate. Guess we're about to find out. The battle begins. The Resolute dropped out of FTO with a violent lurch, artificial gravity stabilizing just as the Zalvek fleet came into visual range. The alien warships adjusted formation instantly, their energy shields flickering to full power. Briggs stood on the bridge, watching the tactical screen as his comms officer spoke. Incoming transmission from the Zalvek commander. Put it through. Tavares' face appeared on the screen, his mandibles tight with irritation. You waste your time. Human. Withdraw, or your ship will be annihilated. Briggs folded his arms. You're awfully confident for someone whose weapons don't work. Tvar hissed. We shall see. The transmission cut off. A heartbeat later, the Zalvek fleet opened fire. Plasma beams lanced across the void, striking the Resolute's hull. Instead of melting through, the energy scattered, dissipating harmlessly across the armor plating. The bridge crew flinched, bracing for impact that never came. Moore's eyes widened. They can't touch us. Knox, now in full combat gear, grinned through the ship's internal comms. Told you. Briggs didn't waste the advantage. Return fire. Target their shield emitters. Strip them down. The Resolute's cannons roared, kinetic slugs slamming into the Zalvek ships. Unlike human armor, Zalvek shielding wasn't built for prolonged kinetic bombardment. Sparks and fire erupted across the enemy vessels as shields flickered and failed. On the view screen, Tavares' expression twisted into disbelief. He hadn't just lost an advantage. He had walked into a trap. Knox, go. Briggs barked, boarding the Wrath. The boarding pod launched from the Resolute's underbelly, streaking toward Tavares' Wrath under the cover of kinetic bombardment. The Zalvek dreadnought was reeling from the unexpected brutality of human weaponry, its shields faltering, its flanking ships breaking formation. Knox and his men braced themselves as a pod impacted the enemy hull, magnetic clamps engaging. The outer hatch hissed open, revealing the dark, metallic corridors of the Zalvek warship. They were greeted with immediate gunfire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, impacting against human armor, only to fail just like before. The Zalvek soldiers hesitated, eyes widening in horror as their weapons proved useless. Knox's voice crackled through comms. Yeah, bad news for you guys, we don't melt. Then he and his squad opened fire. The corridor erupted in kinetic rounds. Zalvek warriors, still stunned, had no time to react. Some tried to fall back. Others charged with clawed hands and energy blades. None survived. Knox kicked down a bulkhead door, clearing a path toward the ship's command deck. Ross, you reading this? Loud and clear, the scientist replied from the Resolute. I hope you're ready for resistance. Tvar isn't going down without a fight. Knox grinned. I'd be disappointed if he did. The squad pressed forward, tearing through Zalvek forces with brutal efficiency. The aliens had never fought an enemy like this, an enemy that didn't fear plasma, that kept coming no matter how much fire they poured into them. Knox reached the final blast doors. Breach charges set. Briggs's voice came through the channel. Finish it. The blast charges detonated with a deafening boom, shattering the reinforced doors of the Zalvek dreadnought's command deck. Knox's squad surged forward, weapons raised, smoke and flickering emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the alien control center. Tvar stood at the center of the bridge, his four-clawed hands braced against the command console, mandibles twitching with barely concealed rage. His officers, some wounded from the concussive blast, scrambled to take defensive positions, their plasma rifles igniting with menacing hum. Knox didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger. Gunfire ripped through the chamber. Kinetic rounds slammed into the Zalvek warriors. Some tried to return fire, but their plasma shots were just as ineffective as before, harmlessly dispersing against the humans' armor. One by one, the aliens fell, their bodies crumpling against the sleek metallic floor. Tvar didn't move. He watched, jaw clenched, as his men collapsed around him. In seconds, the firefight was over. Knox stepped forward, His rifle trained on the Zalvek commander. Your ship is ours, Tvar. Surrender. The Zalvek's mandibles clicked slowly, deliberately. You think this is over? His voice was low, measured, but the fury in his glowing amber eyes was unmistakable. Nox tilted his head. Looks over to me. Tvar exhaled, his stance rigid. You humans, you do not understand what you have done. Nox chuckled. Oh, I understand perfectly. You thought we were weak. Thought you could roll and burn a colony. Remind everyone why the galaxy fears you. But it didn't work, did it? He gestured to the bodies on the floor. Your weapons don't work. Your tactics are outdated. And your empire just lost its biggest advantage. Tvar's claws flexed against console. He knew it was true. Plasma had ruled the battlefield for centuries. Every military doctrine in the known galaxy was built around its destructive power. And now, in a matter of hours, it had been rendered obsolete. The Zalvek weren't just losing this fight. They were losing the future. Let me make this easy for you, Nox continued. Stand down, call off your fleet, and maybe, just maybe, your people survive what happens next. Tvar's eyes burned with hatred. You think your armor makes you invincible? Nox smirked. So far, yeah. A long, tense pause. Then, to Nox's surprise, Tvar laughed. A deep, guttural sound, filled with something far more dangerous than anger. You have won this battle, human, he said, his voice unervingly calm. But you have no idea what you have unleashed. Before Nox could react, Tvar's upper left hand shot forward, slamming a command into the console. Emergency alarms blared. Nox's calm crackled to life. Sergeant. Briggs' voice came through. The dreadnought just activated its reactor overload. Tvar's going to blow the ship. Nox's heart slammed in his chest. He turned his rifle back on the Zalvek commander. Finger tightening on the trigger, Tvar was already lunging. The Zalvek's lower arms went for Nox's rifle, while his upper limbs clawed for his throat. Nox barely twisted in time, deflecting the strike. The two collided, slamming against the command console in a flurry of movement. Tvar was fast, stronger, but Nox was smarter. He twisted, using the Zalvek's momentum against him, and drove an armored elbow into the alien's side. The impact sent Tvar staggering. Nox used the opening, yanking free his combat knife and slamming it into Tvar's chest. The Zalvek shuddered. For a second, his claws flexed. Then his body went rigid. Nox pulled the knife free, letting Tvar collapse onto the floor. The Zalvek commander coughed once, dark blood pooling beneath him. His mandibles parted in a weak, bitter smile. You do not understand what you've done, he rasped. Nox stepped back, breathing hard. Yeah, you keep saying that. He turned toward his squad. We need to move now. Escape and aftermath. The humans rushed through the corridors, dodging bursts of steam and flickering lights as the dreadnought's reactor approached critical failure. The ship's auto-evacuation protocols had triggered, and Nox caught glimpses of surviving Zalvek warriors fleeing toward escape pods. Good. Let them run. Boarding team to Resolute. Nox shouted into his comm, We're clear. Get us the hell out of here. Understood, Briggs replied. Docking bay open, move. The squad reached their boarding pod and launched just as the raft began to tear itself apart. Through the viewport, Nox saw the Zalvek dreadnought's hull splitting at the seams, molten fire consuming its structure. Then, with a final, violent explosion, the ship was gone, back on the Resolute. Nox stepped onto the bridge, still catching his breath. Briggs turned toward him. Tvar, dead, Nox confirmed. But before he went down, he kept saying we didn't understand what we'd done. He exhaled, whatever that means. Briggs was silent for a moment, staring at the smoldering wreckage on the view screen. It means, Ross said grimly, that this was only the beginning. The Zalvek had lost battle, but they weren't going to take it quietly. The war had just begun.